welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. I am Mike Brevik, your host, and I am the owner and founder of CyberDogs and the founder of the Brand Retro podcast. Today I have Michaela Schell with me. I've known Michaela for probably 2-3 years now, something like that. And we've worked together in a few different capacities, and probably most recent is with her business venture called Limitless. So I want to talk a little bit about that, how kind of the journey that it took in creating her brand and kind of the passion that goes into kind of keeping that brand fresh and that brand alive. So Kayla, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you want to start us off by telling us a little bit about Limitless, what it is, what the plan is, and just kind of paint us a picture so people know what it is.
Yeah, so Limitless started as a conference. That was the initial idea. I am in the network marketing profession, have been doing that for almost 8 years now, And it started with actually just a lunch date with a new friend. We had never met before. We went out for lunch. She was a fellow network marketer and said, "Hey, you're doing well in this channel. Can I pick your brain?" Absolutely. I'll go out to lunch with anybody anytime. So we got done with that lunch, had a great conversation. And after that, so I was training for the Fargo half marathon at the time, went on my long run of the week, and it kept spinning in my head as I'm running. You know, what my friend was talking about is our whole conversation revolved around her needing more help, more support, more tools, more resources that were outside of what her company provided, right? Network marketing companies are really, right, any employer, they're providing resources to help you with their company, right? Sell their products, do their job. But she wanted outside tools to make her better. She didn't have those. I was that when she invited me to lunch. So on this run, my head is just spinning of how can I help her? Because it's not just her. Like, I was feeling the same thing. I know a ton of people in the network marketing channel that were feeling the same thing, people outside of the network marketing channel just looking for something. So over the course of that, 5-6 miles, I'd like to say like 10 or 12 miles, but I'm not that good of a runner. Over those 4 or 5 miles, it just kept turning and turning and turning. And by the end of that, Limitless conference was born. And I said, my previous experience was in event planning, marketing, business development type of thing. So that was a very easy step for me to plan another conference, like all the conferences I've planned before. And I thought, why can't I create a big conference for local and regional people to go to just help develop and grow their businesses in a place where they can all be together? So that was the spark. That was the day. That's when it all kind of started taking off.
Very cool. So being you and I kind of met in the networking world anyway, tell me if you agree with this, but I would say a lot of networking companies or organizations, maybe is a better word, they just kind of collect themselves. They collect the people, they find a coffee shop. I would say very few, if any, are brand first. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, and especially in, the network marketing world, you're already kind of plugged into a brand, or you just kind of roll with what's going on instead of thinking about who you are, what you have, how you can share that in a unique way.
Right. So when you went kind of that next step to start Limitless, what was it about the idea of building a brand or making sure that was one of your first stops along the way? What was it about that was attractive to you, and why did you go that route?
That wasn't actually my first route.
Okay.
So, I mean, like I mentioned, I'm in the network marketing model. I know sales. I was in the event planning model. I know that. And I'm in the marketing world. I have a communications degree, but my first step was like, I can plan an event. I know the process, how to get sponsors and do all this kind of stuff. So that's what I did. And it was actually a meeting with you that was like, oh yeah, Michaela, think a little bit deeper into this, because here was my brilliant idea. And I don't know if you probably remember this. So I had this conference idea in my head. It wasn't called Limitless at that time. It was called a conference. Get home. I'm like, what do I do first? And the first thing you always think of is what am I going to call this thing? And I'm a very logical, like data-driven person, like just call it what it is. The bread and butter is in the content, right? Like, I'm going to deliver this great thing to these people. Who cares what it's called? So I was like, we'll just call it like the Midwest Network Marketing Conference. Doesn't matter, right? Say it what it is. So that's what I just had in my head, right? And then the boring tagline of like the region's only conference to whatever. Yeah. Insert boring information here. So I called you. You were one of my first calls because I'm like, okay, I just need to talk this through with somebody. And my husband is an engineer, so talking through event planning and marketing with him isn't his cup of tea. So I called you, said, you're the expert in this. Can we just sit down? This is my idea. And I knew, the first thing I needed obviously too was a website, right? That's the first thing you do. You're going to build a business. What's my website? What's my whatever? So I called you and we sat there and I remember saying that to you like, well, you're like, what are you going to call it? Well, I don't just like Midwest, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I'm pretty sure you could have spit out your coffee probably at that point. But you got me thinking in the terms of like, well, yeah, you could call it that, right? But what really is it? Like, what is it for? What is the dream? What is the vision? How does it make you feel? And as a networker, like I live by that mantra of people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel, right? And that's to me what a brand revolves around. Like, yes, you want good products and good service and good all of this, but what's really going to make them remember you, because there are a lot of companies out there that have great products and services and people and whatever. What's going to make them remember you is how you felt when you left that store or that conference or whatever. And leaving the Midwest Marketing Conference doesn't sound very fun.
Right.
So you probably said it way nicer, but we're like, oh no. That's not the way to go. So it was that conversation of like, really think about what this makes you feel like. And I think like you threw an idea at me that was like the sizzle, or it was something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds way more fun. So that got me down the path of like, I left that and went home and pulled out my paper and just ended up writing down words of not just for the name of this conference, but what does it really represent? Like, I can't grow something bigger with Midwest Regional Conference. Where do I want this to go? How do I want people to feel? What do I want them to get out of it? How do I feel about it? And that's where, after thesaurusing, is that a verb? 10,000 different words of like, okay, I feel this and I feel this and I want it to be this and I want people to experience this. That's where the word limitless really came from, is I want people to feel that in their business, whatever kind of business it is, that the possibilities for them are limitless. The possibilities for their business are limitless. I want them to be inspired by that, and then also get the tools to really, truly become limitless as well. So I realized in that conversation with you that a brand is more than just here's a slap a name on a thing and it's fine. Like it needs to exude that feeling so that, and now people are coming to this just because they heard the name and are like, what is this? What's going on? And then the deeper they get into it, they know the passion behind it and what it wants to lead to. But
yeah, it was fun listening to you answer that question, because to be honest, there were parts of that conversation I kind of forgot. And then as you were
how
kind of
ridiculous I was being.
well, as you were talking through it, I kind of remember this now, in that when you and I sat down, I just remember your passion for what you wanted to do far outweighed and far out. I mean, it just superseded the idea. And I remember your passion for, here's what I want to do. It's going to be exciting. And I want to offer this and I want to have this solution. And then when you dropped that name on me, the Midwest something, I was like, what? That doesn't even match.
We can't even remember it. And it was my idea and I can't even remember it. That's how boring
Well,
it doesn't fit the vision. It doesn't fit the dream.
Right. But I remember walking away from that thinking, I was inspired and I was kind of jacked up with the idea of what you were trying to do, but we were playing in such a kind of a regular kind of space. I'm like, we got to come up with something better than that. So no, thank you for reminding me of that, because that was kind of funny. I remember when we did that meeting, and it just turned into a kind of a wild brainstorm, which was fun, but it kind of led us kind of to that next step of where we wanted to go. So we started the process. Obviously, like you said, we started off with an idea, went to a brand concept, and if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need a website and I'm going to need these channels. Can you tell me a little bit about and completely from your perspective, this is what the journey looked like to get this thing off the ground. Here's the parts I didn't like. Here's the pleasant surprises. Just give me the whole nuts and bolts of how that looked for you. What was that journey?
Right. I wish that it was more um, elegantly laid out or happening, but it was literally. So I got done with that run, came home, jabbered my husband's ear off about this idea for way too long because he got bored with it. Was like, okay, I need to talk to somebody about this. Reached out to you, reached out to a couple other friends. Like I use the Voxer walkie-talkie platform, and I think I probably like limited out on the length that you can talk on Voxer to a few of my friends in the channel. So it really started as talking to people about it, a few trusted, close people. And I develop a thought through speaking. Like I just need to get it out there. So it started like that. And then it started, okay, this sounds great. I want to do it. I know for sure I want to do it. How do I even start? And I think that for anybody who's starting any kind of business or any kind of idea, that's where most people just stop because they don't know what to do that first step. Like, because it's so overwhelming. Like I looked at this and I'm a big picture person, a big dreamer. Like from the beginning, I was like, okay, yeah, we can have this conference, but I didn't just stop there. I was like, oh, this could be, in cities all over North Dakota. Then it could be global. Then it could be, I get so big in my head and all the things I want to do. And it's no longer a conference. Now it's, I'm speaking on stages and it's a podcast and it's a this and it's a this. And pretty soon your mind is so full and you're just like, I can't do all that. I'm one person. This is crazy. And you don't know where to start. So you just don't. So many people don't start. So many big ideas and dreams don't start because they don't know what the first step is. So my first step was, after talking to people, like to actually put this in action, was nothing outrageous. I literally opened my computer, opened a Word document, and just started typing down the random things that I knew I needed to do. Like everything from, okay, name and website were at the top of the list. Tickets, I need to figure out how to sell tickets. I need to find a venue. Oh, sponsors. It was everything from like, oh, here's this one random catchphrase that would be awesome. Oh, what about t-shirts? Oh, I should think about thank you notes. I should, like, every little thing that is in your head that needs to happen today or that needs to happen 10 years from now.
Yep.
came out on that sheet of paper. And that just helped me get past that first step of like, how can I even do this? Because once it all came out on that sheet of paper, then you can look at it. And then I was able to organize it, right? Like, well, here's what needs to happen first. I need to develop ticket costs, kind of what it's going to look like, the shell of it, and then get a website up and going. And then after that, it was like, okay, I got my website. What am I going to use to sell tickets? Let's do that research. And then it just becomes one step after the other. Like I can't take a big, huge leap and be a global company tomorrow, but I can take the next step in, I got to learn Eventbrite and how to create a ticket, right? Okay, great. I did that. I learned something. Now I need to do this. Oh, wait, I should probably set up an LLC, backtrack, do that. Okay. There's no beautiful step to it. Maybe now if I did a second one or I told somebody how to do it, I'd have that for them. But now I'm turning into this like advice giver guru, but that's my advice to anybody who wants to start something, is just like unload it, brain dump everything, and then go through that list. And it becomes very easy to see this needs to happen first, second, and you just take one baby step every single day towards something bigger.
Yeah. So what I love about that is it's so cleansing to a degree, because when you sit down, and even though it might feel a little chaotic and a little jumbled, you're just
Incredibly chaotic and jumbled.
you're just getting it out there and trying to get it on paper, figure out what fits, what doesn't. And even in that sense of almost word vomit, it starts to take on a hierarchy as to what you need to attack first. And like a lot of people kind of feel like that's a broken system. Like, God, I wish I just had, step one, step two, step three. And it's like, well, it's not really possible until you get it out of your head and on paper. And that's such a huge part of the branding process and even the idea process of just, you got to figure out how many walls, windows, doors you want in that house before you can start building it.
Right.
So with that, what's the best piece of advice you got during this journey? You said you reached out to a lot of different people. Obviously, you're pretty well connected, especially locally here. I'd be curious just to know kind of who was part of that equation for you.
Yeah, that's one thing I would have done differently is I would have reached out to more people. So like I went to you, you're obviously great in this realm, so I knew that you were a trusted person. I reached out to a few other people in different capacities that were in my network that I knew could help me. But I wish from the beginning, and again, this comes from learning, right? Like you're not going to do everything perfect. In hindsight, I do it this way, but I wish I would have talked to more people. I wish I would have brought more people along on the journey with me. Like I'm a perfectionist. I want to create the thing, and I'm very independent as well. So I want to create the thing and then deliver it to everybody in this beautifully packaged, perfect conference, whatever it is that you're working on. And so then that often means that I'm alone, right? I'm figuring this out alone. I'm creating it alone. I'm running through scenarios all by myself. Now I'm learning this. Bring in more people. Ask more people for help, for advice. Um, just get their opinions, and you don't have to listen to it, but it sparks a new way of thinking with every person in your brain that you maybe didn't think of, or there's a new tool. And I think what's so important about this, as I'm learning now, like my initial idea was to do this conference, right? That was the idea. I want to do this conference. Well, now that's spun off into a bunch of other different things that I want to create for people, right? There's a podcast, there's a blog element, there's, training courses, it's blooming into something bigger. Now I'm starting to bring more people along on that journey with me, because people don't want the finished product, right? They don't just want, here's your package in a bow. They want to be a part of it. And being a part of it means that you're in it from the nitty-gritty, and they get to see, this is how this evolved. This is how this works. This is how, these are the failures that happen. Because if anybody, especially with Limitless Conference, like it's all for business builders and growers. They don't want to see the perfect thing at the end, because there's all the crap that you got to get through before that. They want to see somebody going through the crap, right? That's way more fun than here's the beautiful thing at the end. And they appreciate the thing at the end too. When they know that journey, they feel like they're a part of something, and we all want to be a part of something. So from the beginning, I just wanted to create this thing and bring it to the people. And now I'm realizing, and I wish I would have realized it from the beginning, is bring a bunch of people along on this journey with you. And it's okay if they see you fail, like own up to that failure. And this is where we're pivoting. And I think people respect you more for that. And I think they get more ingrained in what you have to offer. And at the end are way more likely to not just buy whatever you're selling or whatever you have, but share it with other people, bring more people along on the journey, stay a loyal customer, all this repeat business, because they feel like it's theirs. It's their baby too. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is let people see that journey.
Yeah, I would also say that, for what it's worth, I think the way you did it is maybe better than you even give yourself credit for, because somebody had to pick up the ball and get that vision rolling and get that vision created, I believe, before you can bring those other people. Because I think there was so much of the idea of Limitless that was so unique and proprietary to you that I don't know that other voices in that room would have helped you at first. We kind of had to bring it to life.
Sure. Right.
Then it made sense.
Right.
Because I just remember when we first sat down, the enthusiasm and just the idea itself, I think more people at that point might have confused things until
Because I was probably, honestly, because I was a little confused. Like, and maybe that's how every brand starts, right? You want to be a bunch of different things. You have a bunch of different ideas. You're just formulating it, right?
Right.
Me talking with you was part of the process of like, what do I even want to do? So you're right. Okay. Don't bring people in right away.
I think it's going to be different for everybody,
Right.
but like you had a big idea there. And like you'd said earlier, a lot of people might have even had an idea like that or similar to that, or maybe they had the exact same idea, but it's such a big idea, nobody did anything with it, or they didn't know how to start, or they didn't know who to call. So the fact that you figured that out, picked up the ball and started running with it, like I think it was yours to define for a little bit. I think
Yeah,
you did it right.
I had to mull it through a little bit. Well, I will take that compliment if you want to keep telling me I was
I
really
I think you were right. So as you look at other, probably more so today than anything else, because you've got a lot of the elements in place. As you look at other conferences, events, or who you would consider to be would-be competitors of Limitless, where do you think you stack up? How do you feel about your brand? What is it? Is it, are you just as in love with it today as you were day one, or more so, or less than? Tell me about that.
You're hitting an emotional heart place for me, Mike, because that question is one of the biggest things that I struggle with, and it's the comparison. Like one of my friends, he's in the nonprofit world and just pulled off the most amazing event like ever. It was virtual. It was phenomenal. And I'm watching him and on Facebook, and I'm like, I don't think I could do that. I don't, right? Like you get into this comparison game of like, what? He had that idea. That was brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Like just all of that kind of stuff, right? With an event or whatever business you have. So that's a huge mental and emotional roadblock for me, just in general, of like looking at, because you want to do both, right? I need to look towards others for inspiration. Also, like I've been to enough conferences and events to know what was great and what was not so great, and that helped me build mine, right? Like I will definitely not do this because it's boring. Like that's like one example is breakout sessions. That's how I originally was going to do it, right? We're going to go in and everybody's going to do breakout sessions and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what do I struggle with at conferences? I want to go to everything and I can't. And then I feel bad that I missed. And from a logistical standpoint, it's insane to do that. It's hard. So I'm like, why am I doing that then? You don't have to do that. Just because that's like standard conference doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So we got rid of breakout sessions, have shorter 20, 25-minute presentations for everybody. But because that was comparison, right? I'm looking at others for inspiration, what I didn't like. But then there's the other piece of that of like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pull this off to make it look like so-and-so's or this? And so it's that fine line that I'm continuing to walk of draw inspiration, but don't get caught in that trap of, because all it does is it makes you feel like yours isn't good enough. And to go back to like that initial branding conversation that we had before is, what do I love about mine? What makes mine different? It's okay if it's not this person's or that person's, or if it doesn't have this element. That's not who I am. And I started having to realize that too. I talked about my friend in the nonprofit world who pulled it off. He is like the biggest ball of energy ever. Like you can't have coffee with him for 5 minutes without catching like so much contagious energy. Like you just need to go for like a run because you're so jacked up. I'm not that person. I'm a very stoic, like sarcastic. That's not me. So it's like if I tried to recreate that, it would be crap. So it's like I can't do what he's doing. I have to do what I'm doing. So I lost track of the question that you asked me, but
You, you
because we went
no,
down the rabbit hole of my biggest fear. But
no, you actually answered it prior to, I believe you think you answered it. Um, the question I had asked was, basically, how do you feel about your own, brand in comparison to some of those others you might be watching or stacking yourself up against? And you started the question by saying, wow, that's a really personal thing to me. And that's, to me, the right answer, because to have personal connection to your brand and to be able to still feel that connected to it, that where you're like, oh my God, that's kind of a personal, that's perfect. Because I think it speaks to the passion and the connection for what it is you're trying to do. And I completely agree with you. I I'm somebody who, I love to study other brands. I love to stack my own brand up against others. But a lot of times when I'm doing that, I'm looking for the gaps where I feel like I sort of compete there. I don't compete there at all. It's only almost to validate, qualify, and or calibrate my own vision to some degree, to not necessarily feel bad about what I'm doing, because we're all in this different place in the journey. And maybe your friend's journey and your journey are two different things.
right,
So
exactly.
where that splits, that could be completely different for him versus you. And I think that's kind of how you look at branding, and why you why you want to keep it personal, why you want to be connected to it.
And just continuing to go back to that value of like, what did I want to bring to this? And reminding myself of that, like, what was my intention here? Am I doing that? Because if I'm doing that, then that's all that matters, right? If I don't have, a rock star singing on stage or whatever, like, did I come to do what I wanted to do and what I wanted to give to the people? And if at the end of the day I still feel that way, I know my audience will too. So
Right.
that it's really, I've always had to continue to go back to that of, and it goes back to, even the name and the brand, like limitless belief. Like, do I believe in myself? Because you start comparing, or you start seeing other things, or you start, oh, I'm not good in this arena. Ugh, like, that's okay. You can't be all things, like, but you still have limitless potential and possibilities and belief in yourself in whatever arena you are. So it's a mindset game with a lot of it, but just going back to and that goes back to why it's so important to have a brand to begin with, because if you don't really strongly know who you are, you will be no one or nothing. Like, then I would have copied this person on this event and this on this and that, and I would have tried to been all things, and it would have just been nothing.
Yeah. So what's the 1, 2, maybe 3 things that live within the Limitless brand that are 100% Michaela?
Community, and that's a really general word, but I am of the firm belief that we all rise together. And especially from, this brand grew out of me being a network marketer, but it's as I grew more, and who else needs this? It's the solopreneurs, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the people who are doing, wanting to start some kind of side business or something. And we're doing it by ourselves, right? We're in business for ourselves, right? We're usually party of one, employee of one. We're sweeping floors, taking out garbages, and developing this huge business, all of that, and everything in between. And Limitless, it was so important to me that we need to remember that even though we're in business for ourselves, we're not by ourselves. There are other people out there that are going through what we are going through. Maybe they're in a different channel or whatever that is. But if I can bring all those people together to remember that we all rise together, right? If we support each other, if we share ideas, if we even just share that energy, right? Like, sit down to coffee and talk with somebody about it. Like, they're not going to steal your idea. Who cares? If they take it, great. Like, more the merrier, whatever. It does, none of that matters. All ships rise with the tide. So that was extremely important to me, is I wanted to bring solopreneurs who are doing this alone. They're still going to be doing it alone. They got to go back to their office by themselves, but now they have a group of people that they know are experiencing the same thing. So that was a really huge part of it for me. And the other part of it is being tangible, like, the fluffy motivational stuff. We all need that when we're on a walk to, like, yeah, pump us up. But the how to, like, how often have we gone someplace and we're like super inspired from this, podcast, or this, Rachel Hollis video, or whatever it is. Like, then we get home and we're like, what do I do now? Like, okay, I want to get you all inspired, but I also want to give you something. Like, you left with a notebook full of notes of, like, I know what I need to do here. I know the next step. I know how to do this. I know who to call to make this happen. You have a place that is, or something that is built out for you a little bit, so you know what step to take next. So I would say those are the two biggest pieces of what this really is for me.
Obviously, I understand where you're coming from with that, being a business owner myself and having created, my own brands, is that it's a lonely space.
Mm-hmm.
There's more times than not, you're flapping out into the wind. You've got this idea and you've got this concept, and you can, throw it over the fence to a few of your friends and colleagues and maybe get a little bit of a reaction that fills your cup and keeps you going. But by and large, no offense to the family and friends, but like, they're not with you on that journey. And if
Right.
they've not
They're the
done that,
supportive, they're the rah-rah, but they don't know how to event plan. They don't know how to,
right,
build a website like you're doing. Like,
right. So to bring those people together it's a fantastic idea, because I think that's a huge part of why networking works or doesn't work sometimes, is because you get these people who understand and relate, and that's the key. So
absolutely. Find your
so cool.
circle.
Uh, Tell me a little bit more about where we can learn more about Limitless, kind of what the plan is going forward, and kind of what's the next steps for you and Limitless.
Right. Well, you asked me the $1 million question that I don't know is what the plan is going forward because because of a lot of things, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, so all events have been put on hold. So I don't know. I don't know about that one. But the cool thing about that is that obviously our conference right now is supposed to be April 18th, is postponed, and I have 10 different scenarios of what it's going to look like in the future, and we just wait until the governor says what he's going to say about when we can do things. But what really makes that cool is that it's given me more time to plan new things and new ideas. And, so again, I'm a big dreamer. So I've planned everything out of like how I'm going to launch this in other countries, right? Which that's way down the road, but also just like all the pieces of this that make sense for people, right? We've got a blog that's starting up here in a few weeks. That was able to happen because the conference got pushed back a little bit. I've got some networking training and other courses in the works that are being developed, all sorts of those things that are coming down the pipe as we wait for this conference. And then once the conference is here, and I think that is what's so important about Limitless too, is like this started as a conference, right? That was going to be like one and done. But through the process, I realized, well, people need this more than just one day, right? You need this long term. So, for anybody that's on that journey of branding or business building or whatever it is, it's going to change. So I even like am scared to say, well, here's what's coming up, because I know along that journey there's going to be 10 different pivots, right? 10 different new ideas, or I'm talking with more people and something else is going to change. And it really is step by step, right? So we'll have this conference this year, but now there's also different components and pieces that will come along with it, and training at the other end. And once those start to happen, maybe there's a new vision or goal that comes up, or a new need that I find that solopreneurs need. So keeping that open, which again is hard for me because I'm this planner, right? And as an event planner, you like do the steps and you have the event. And that's how I like to set up my mind. Like, here's the roadmap, here's the product. But when you're creating something like this, you have to leave space for breathing room and growth, and knowing that whatever idea I have is probably not going to be the idea that I end up with at the end, because there's going to be a million changes down the road. But the conference will happen in some capacity, hopefully very soon. And there will be a lot of other cool components that come before and after that to keep people building and connecting and growing in a lot of different ways.
And people can learn more about it, obviously, on your website, right?
Yeah, limitlessnetworkmarketing.com. Oh my gosh, can I tell this story now that I say the website? Speaking
Absolutely.
of branding and change,
yeah.
It's an important story. So the website is called Limitless Network Marketing, right? And this talks about the steps of getting to a place, right? Like, okay, I got to create the website first. If you build it, they will come, kind of thing. Like, get that. Well, what am I going to call it, right? We know the conference is Limitless. It started out as Limitless Network Marketing Conference. I'm in the network marketing world. There's thousands of people in direct sales network marketing that could need this. Okay, that domain was available, Limitless Network Marketing, because Limitless Conference wasn't available. There's another Limitless Conference someplace in the world. So that's what it was, right? And very quickly, like, the website was built, everything was great. And within a couple months, as I'm sharing this with people, I realize it's not just network marketers who need this. It's the solopreneurs, it's the business builders, it's people who have a photography hobby that they want to change into a side business. It's all of that, right? It's people who are in full-time careers that want some extra professional development. And I'm like, okay, here's the pivot moment, right? Okay, this is open for everybody. We're tweaking our content. We're doing to make this applicable for all solopreneurs. Well, my website's name is Limitless Network Marketing. It just pigeonholed me, right? But that's okay. Like, at first I was like, how do I change whatever? And it's like, you know what? That's okay. It's been out on everything. It's fine. That's part of that journey that we talked about too. Like, things change. Now this is for everybody, and it grew bigger than I expected it to, which is fantastic. And there will still be little remnants of, a decision that was made because it had to be made. But now it changed. And you know what? Someday down the road, that website will change, and that's okay. And as domains open up, and as I, make enough money with this to hopefully buy the $2,000 domain name instead of the $200 domain name, right? Whatever that is. But that was part of the learning and the process of this whole thing, is that things are going to be wrong, and you won't know that until you know it. And it's okay. So people can find me at limitlessnetworkmarketing.com, but it's not just for network marketers.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great addition to the conversation. And as I told you before we got on here, the whole idea of the Brand Retro podcast is about kind of maintaining that center and being able to kind of, when things don't go right, or if you zig when you're supposed to zag, and you're building your brand, you're building your company, it's about just finding center and being able to come back to that. Remember why you did it in the first place. Remember how it made you feel. Refill your cup with your passion that you need, and you just kind of let it play out. Figure out what's right for your brand, what's not right for your brand, because you might get another year down the road and Limitless Network Marketing was the perfect name. We don't know yet.
Right. Let's hope that happens somehow.
Yeah, we don't know yet. So
okay, so I have a
thank
question
you.
for you, Mike.
Yes.
So okay, I'm about a year into this. One, how often do you recommend that people check back into that? And say you do need to make a revision or a bit, or like how many companies too, like, oh, you're 3 or 4 years in and you want to, it starts with I'm going to revise my logo, and it turns into like, what does that process look like? For me, I'm new in this. I'm new in this brand building. I'm new in this as far as a planning for the future. What should I be looking at down the road of, oh, I should reassess here? Or does that make sense? The question I'm asking. I'm in this like newness process, but I know that is coming up in a year or two for me, or maybe less. I don't know. How do you navigate that?
There are a ton of best practices out there, and depending on who you're talking to, you're going to get different answers. I know some pretty heavy hitting marketing people that redo their website every year. I know others that are on a 3 to 5 year rotation. I can't really tell you what's right, because I think it's going to be different for everybody depending on how your business and your brand evolves, which should always be part of the equation. So like if you're somebody who's built a brand and you're like, hey, I got my logo done, I'm never going to touch it again. That's the wrong mindset. You should be continually evolving it and trying to figure out ways to not only, when I say evolve, I don't mean necessarily change. I mean grow, expand, create variation, develop leverage, find a way to continually bringing that brand to life to the point where it is moving forward, it is growing, it is developed. So I think as the brand owner, or basically the proprietor of that brand, being in touch with it and always kind of checking back in on your gut feeling, your passion for it, it'll kind of tell you when to kind of zig when you should zag, and kind of figure out what your next steps are. I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast rule. I just think that if you're growing your brand and listening to your customer and watching your channels and making sure that it's feeding your business the way you want it to be fed and growing it, the answer will kind of develop itself, and you will slowly just start to evolve naturally versus forcing it. Because like when companies force themselves to rebrand, or they force themselves to just change for the sake of changing, then they don't even know why they did it.
Right. And we've all seen that a million times. Like all of a sudden something switches and we're like, what? Wait, where's the place that I always went to, or whatever,
Yep. I've had clients. Yep. I've had clients reach out to me for a brand. Like, we want to redo our logo, redo our brand. And the first question I ask is why? And they're like, well, I don't know. It's been 10 years. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make it wrong, but is there more to it? Because there should be. Like, it shouldn't just be a timestamp that led you to that. You should have some feeling about it. You should have, some direction that came from the customer, something that, hey, our business, our industry has changed. There's got to be more to it than just a timestamp.
I think we so often forget that it's a living, breathing thing, right? So we see a brand as like, there's their logo, right? And it needs a change because it's from 1984, right? Like, it's not just a picture on a piece of paper. It's not just a storefront. It's a living, breathing, growing plant or whatever you want to call it. It has a life of its own, and it should continue to be fed and nurtured and fostered all the way along,
And we have
along the road.
And we have to remember as the brand owners that we are way too close to it to get tired of
True.
it. So like I see it a lot with clients, and I've probably experienced it myself, where when I'm staring my own logo and my own brand in the face all day, every day, yeah, there's times where I'm like, I should tweak this or change this. I have to remember that that's not the norm for your customer. Your customers maybe, if you're subliminally putting in front of them, you're probably looking at more of a 3 to 5 year cycle before it really even starts to sink in. So if
Right.
you're getting tired of what you're doing after a year, you need to multiply it times 3 at least and give it some time to
Right.
live. So
Right. You're right. We're too close to it. We're looking at it every day that it just gets
yeah.
boring. That's not the right word, boring, but it feels like it's the same when
Well,
it's
you become
not.
critical of it after
Yeah.
after a while. And that's, kind of the whole point of where this whole podcast thing has taken me is it's really about that calibration point, being able to come back to that. I call it the brand retro mindset, but it's coming back to that original thought. So like that meeting you and I first had on Limitless, that to some degree should be where you come back to every time to kind of get your
Hmm.
bearings again. So as you go down this road and you start to kind of go off the path to some degree, coming back to that original thought that really truly excited you on that day, like why did I create this? Oh yeah. Oh my God, that was so fun. And all of a sudden it's like you might be closer than you think.
When
So
I even just having that conversation with more people all the time, like it's been a year and I know what it is, but I talk to you about it now a year later, and it's like, yeah, oh, you get re-energized about what you created. Well, and even the pivots along the road. So like, okay, this pandemic happened. I had the option of, do I postpone or do I just make it completely virtual? And I struggled with that. And I had gone to a trusted friend of mine and just again like, how could I, what should I do, what's your advice? And she went back to that with me, like, what was your goal with this? And I said the same thing I said to you, like, to bring people together, to give them a community. It's like, you can't, as hard as you try, you can't do that over Zoom, right? You need people in a room. So it was like, we got to take that risk and put it on hold so that we can bring people together, because there's something different of looking at somebody on a screen than sitting next to somebody, or maybe we'll probably have to sit 6 feet away from somebody, but like being there in person, right? And you can go shake that person's hand or elbow bump them or whatever it would be, and having that community, especially for this first one. That was my vision for this whole thing. The whole reason it started is that community of that we're all in this together. So that helped me make the decision of like, we're not going to go completely virtual. We may have to have a virtual component. Absolutely. Maybe it'll dictate us, as this, we don't know what it's going to be. Maybe I'm going to eat my words right now and we're going to be virtual. But it stopped me from panicking in that moment in March when it was like, everything's shutting down, cancel it and go to Zoom. Like it stopped me from making that decision right away, because I went back to, why did I create this in the first place? And it helped me make a really hard decision along the way that without thinking of that, I probably would have made the wrong decision.
yeah. Well, and I think because I think that's the part that's relatable and that's the part that excites people about Limitless, you can't really discredit that answer,
Hmm.
because you're just feeding into what people fell in love with in the first place.
Right.
So
Right.
it's going to work.
I,
So
keep saying that. I'm hoping the universe is like, somebody smarter than me will create an antidote or or a, what's it called? Vaccine.
yeah,
Uh,
no, I think you're on the right path. I mean, I think authenticity is kind of a buzzword right now in the marketing industry, but there is something to be said about being authentic and having your brand tied to the person and vice versa. So what you're doing right now is both. So it's fantastic.
No, thanks, Mike. I had a friend
Yeah.
say that to me too along the journey. She's like, I want to see more of you. And I was like, whoa, what? Why do you want to see more of me? Like, that's not like, this is the Limitless. This is everybody's. And as she said that, and I started paying more attention to other brands that I love, I was like, why do I love them? Oh, because of its creator because of its story, because of this. Like, it is that person. It's not all about me, but it's people. People want to be inspired by people, not by a logo, not by a thing, not by a whatever. And that's been a challenge for me, like something I've had to get over on this journey. And I'm still working hard on that because, I'm a Midwest girl. Like, we're just like shying away from the spotlight or the, like, oh, I like my little bit of recognition, but now that's too much. I don't, like somebody gives you a compliment and you're like, oh, so it's hard to let yourself be a part of that brand when it's like, no, I just want this to be for everybody else. Like, this is theirs, but they need a person to connect with. So I thought that was really great advice that friend gave to me of like, you put yourself more in your brand. It's okay. It's not, oh, what's the word? Like egotistical or, things like that of like, I mean, it can be, you got to be careful of that, but it's okay to be the person. And I think about the brands that I really love, and it's because I know the person behind it, or I feel like I know them. I've watched this girl. She could be my bestie, but I've never actually said a word to her in person. Right. So that's something that was hard for me. Still is hard for me to do because it just goes kind of against my weird Midwestern, stay back, dig in the farm kind of roots. But
yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there's a part of that because even when I started CyberDogs, there was a part of creating that's like, I just wanted CyberDogs to be its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be tethered to me, and I don't want it to be behind me. Like, long story short is I basically overthought it.
Mm-hmm.
And when all the dust settled, I realized that somebody's got to lead it.
Right. It's
And
got to be
that
somebody.
right. And that somebody had to be me, because the idea behind it was different enough that it needed explanation. It was unique enough that somebody had to be out there selling it. Like, there were elements that I created that kind of made it possible for it to succeed, but also made it impossible for me to not own that piece.
Right.
So to your point, I had to get over it and just decide, whether I'm going to get embarrassed or I'd prefer not to be the face of this thing. I don't really have a choice.
Tough, right? So you have
So
to lean into it,
you have
and
to.
it's hard sometimes, especially when you have to be. People who do it so well are, you said the buzzword authenticity, or they're vulnerable, or you have to share some of those hard things sometimes, or you have to, talk about things that aren't easy to talk about, or whatever it would be. So there is that vulnerability piece too, which makes it hard. Or that piece of like, sometimes you got to kind of brag on yourself that something awesome happened and it feels weird and uncomfortable, but you got to do it. And most people are just thrilled for you, and it makes them more excited. They don't do the opposite. And so it's hard.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think it's as weird as we make it. I
It's
mean,
all
like
in our
you said,
head for sure.
right?
Right.
Like you said, there's a line probably where a guy could go too far to be an egomaniac and whatnot. But to your point, yeah, there's a part of it where we're just overthinking it. We're Midwest humble, and we're trying to avoid the spotlight at all
Right.
costs. Thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing the Limitless story, because it's obviously one I'm connected to, but at the same time, it's one that I've been watching develop, since the beginning. So that's been a lot of fun. You're actually our first guest on this. I'm doing like a version of these where it's basically going to be a brand spotlight, and you're our first one. So thank you again for coming on. I think it went awesome. And
thanks for having me.
I'd love to have you on again. So
you're giving me free reign to just talk about myself and what I love and my conference. Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Anybody who wants to learn more about the brand retro mindset, marketing overall, and obviously kind of what we're doing from a marketing perspective, check us out at cyberdogsmarketing.com. Thanks.